I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're listening to Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the sins of the underworld. We're Ireland's top podcast for 2025, and now we've got a new website. So if you want to learn more about crime and criminals, if you want stories, extras, and podcast subscriber specials, go to www.crimeworld.com.
So there's something particularly cruel, I think, about these kinds of fraud where really ordinary people, for want of a better term, really are made suffer for somebody else's greed.
Yeah.
Tell us about Seamus Murphy, who, because he really fits into that. It seems kind of really callous as a crime.
Yeah, well, certainly the judge thought so. And there didn't seem to be anything in Seamus Murphy's background that would have given you a clue that he was capable of this. I mean, he's a 59-year-old father of three. He'd been in business with his company, Murphy Heffernan Limited, since 2013. They'd done conveyance or surveying work across Galway. They'd been involved in everything from luxury housing developments to retirement homes. Back in 2018, he was actually him and his company, they orchestrated the building of Síle Seoige's home in Spiddal that she did interviews about earlier this week. So he was somebody that, in general, on the surface of things, people would have held in high regard.
But we didn't, he has a respectable businessman, and people come to some people like that and they don't expect to be wary, or they're not looking to, buy crypto off somebody or something like that. They presume they can be trusted. But he had a particular sort of modus operandi with the victim that you spoke to.
Yeah, well, as you say, he was somebody that on the surface of things, you should have been able to trust. If you had a building project, you went to somebody like this, and everything everything to a degree revolves on trust.
Yeah.
In the case of the victim, in this case, Padraig Walsh, he's an 86-year-old man. He's a farmer. He's living in Cluish Valley, very kind of isolated rural area. That's part of a major wind farm development about 30 kilometres from Barna, which was where Seamus Murphy was based. So SSE Electricity were putting up wind turbines going back 2015 to 2017. And one of the farms that they went to was a farm owned by Padraig Walsh. And they said the representative asked Padraig Walsh if they could put a wind turbine on his land. And it was something that Padraig was open to.
Yeah.
And a figure was mentioned that Padraig was initially quite happy with. But then one of Padraig's neighbours came to him and asked him, had SSE been in contact? Padraig said they had. He told the neighbour what he was offered, and the neighbour said, well, I've actually been offered 10 times that amount, and I'm dealing with a guy called Seamus Murphy.
Right.
Would you like to speak with him? Because he's acting as an intermediary for me, and I'm obviously getting a better deal. So Padraig, he wasn't somebody who was used to dealing with business on this level. So he said, yes, of course, if this man is working on behalf of my neighbour and he's doing a good job.
Yeah.
So Seamus Murphy arrived up at the house. Now, you'd have to picture this. It's a cottage up on the side, kind of on a steep incline. The whole area is kind of sectioned off. You come to a gateway, and then you have to walk about 1 kilometre up to Padraig's house. It's a little cottage inside. It's a farmhouse.
Yeah.
Table in front of the fire, and that's where this deal was struck.
Right.
Padraig sat at one end. Seamus Murphy pulled out these documents, said, I'm going to need you to sign these if you want me to act as your intermediary, and then I'll basically have power to do all the dealings with SSE on your behalf. So Padraig said, grand. And in the beginning, everything seemed to be going really well. Seamus was coming and going. He was dealing with SSE. The turbines were going in. As far as Padraig was concerned, the money was coming back the other way.
So does he invest the money? Does he build, do you build them and then charge SSE?
No.
They literally sort of...
No, SSE, they have this this is all part of
the scheme, is it, basically?
Well, no, it's basically this massive Galway wind park.
Yeah.
Cleash Valley is part of that. There's like 58 wind turbines on it, and they were basically putting these turbines in, and if people owned land inside of them, they'd put in the wind turbine, and then payments would go back to the person whose land it was.
Okay.
So basically, Seamus Murphy was acting as the intermediary between Padraig Walsh and SSE.
Yeah.
And in the initial stages, as far as Padraig was concerned, everything was going wonderfully. Seamus would often call up to the house, tell him how things were going. Padraig believed that the money was coming back, that the checks were coming from SSE. And it was Padraig's understanding that Seamus was being paid for his end of things by SSE.
So he got to keep a cut of some type or whatever.
That Seamus was being paid, but it wasn't. It certainly the amount of money that disappeared from Padraig's account was not meant to be going to Seamus Murphy. And we're talking about a lot of money here. Because
what did it total amount to, and over what period of time? Like?
Well, we're talking about initially, when Seamus Murphy was charged, he was charged with 8 counts, and that involved a total sum of just under 200,000 euros. Now, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of theft, and that was for 2 amounts of 53,000 euros. So what he pleaded guilty to was the theft of 106,000 euros from Padraig Walsh.
Which is a huge amount of money. I mean,
it is for an 86-year-old man.
Absolutely, living in rural Ireland. Like it's a life-changing amount of money, and presumably a life-changing amount of money for his family.
And I suppose the thing is, this wouldn't have been caught, except Padraig Walsh also had an accountant who was working on his behalf, and it was the accountant that spotted that 50,000 euros. Something seemed odd where this money was. So Padraig confronted Seamus Murphy about it. Padraig's family confronted Seamus Murphy about it. And in the beginning, Padraig said Seamus Murphy was humming and hawing about it. But there was this meeting where they had a meeting every year where they would talk out the tax affairs and everything.
Yeah.
And it was again put to Seamus Murphy about the sum of 50,000 euros. And Padraig says, when I was speaking with Padraig last week, Padraig said that the next day after that meeting, Seamus Murphy contacted the accountant and said, all this money was meant to come to me.
Yeah.
And he said that those documents that he had got Padraig Walsh to sign on the first day actually specified that all the money was meant to be going to Seamus Murphy. Now, Padraig knew nothing about this. So when the family confronted Seamus Murphy, they said that he behaved in a very bullying manner. He was having none of it. At one stage, he told them, if this goes to court, there's only going to be one winner, and that's me.
Yeah.
But they did take him to court. This went all the way to the High Court before ever it went to the criminal side of it, went to Galway Circuit Court. It went to the High Court where it was resolved by mediation, and ultimately Seamus Murphy agreed to pay back the money to Padraig Walsh. But parallel to that, there was the Garda investigation, and that's what resulted in Seamus Murphy being sentenced to 2 years in prison there a couple of weeks ago.
So in his interview with you, Padraig compares Seamus Murphy to DJ Carey, and there is something of that sort of in his criminal behaviour, isn't it?
I think he was making that comparison in relation to just how convincing that Seamus Murphy had been when he was speaking with him. You know, he said when Seamus Murphy first arrived up to the house, he said he seemed so pleasant, so likeable, somebody who knew everything, you know, any concerns that Padraig would have had, you know, dissipated because this guy was so convincing.
Yeah.
So it's that aspect of this theft that he's comparing to DJ Carey.
And do we get any explanation for how somebody that led a seemingly respectable life, would presumably had access to money, maybe not millions, but certainly wasn't, you know, living on the breadline. Do we give any explanation of why he did what he did?
Well, in short, no.
Yeah.
Judge Owen Garavan, in his summing up, he said that this was a well-executed, well-thought-out crime. He said that it was motivated by nothing other than greed.
Yeah,
you know, and that it was carried out with an utter ruthlessness. even at the very end, on the day of the sentencing, Seamus Murphy tried to delay it again. He withdrew instructions from his own barrister. He said, and his solicitor. He said he wanted to hire a new legal team and that he wanted to change his plea. Yeah. But we never did. He wasn't super cooperative with the guards either. Yeah. So we never really did get an explanation for why he behaved in the way that he did, other than Judge Owen Garvin saying that he did this to enrich his own businesses. Which is
it's always baffling, I think, I mean, at least if somebody explains of a gambling addiction or something like that, it's a bit, whether it might not excuse their actions, but it certainly explains them. I think because these frauds, they're very personal to people. Like, it's somebody that they know, and it often leaves the victims feeling like, stupid, really, isn't it? And feeling like they should have seen this. And it does seem to have a deep sort of personal impact, which I think was suggested in the victim impact statement.
It was. And when Padraig was talking to me, that was something that came across as well, that his ability to trust people had been damaged by this. Now, on the other side of that, he did say that, he wanted to thank his accountant, because it was because of the hard work of the accountant and the fact that the accountant in this was so trustworthy and so diligent in what he did, that this was spotted. Yeah. I mean, at one stage when it was put, when Padraig and the family put to Seamus Murphy that, that this money, he shouldn't have been taking this money. He basically presented Padraig, and Padraig showed me this. It was like a sheaf of pages, about a centimetre thick, and it was a list of itemised items for which he was going to bill Padraig Walsh, and Padraig said that the total from this itemised bill was in the region of 420,000 euros.
Really? What's this for? Phone calls and things like that?
This is for looking at the site. This was for calling out to Padraig's house. This was for anything and everything. There was stuff about a tractor that he'd asked Padraig if he could store on site. He was billing Padraig 1,000 euros a week for the rental of the tractor. Like, Padraig said that was one of the hardest things for him, was that this man who had come into his home was somebody that he felt he could trust, who was already dealing with his neighbour, who had a good work history, had worked on other projects. And it seems that even from the early stages, he was planning on stealing from an 86-year-old man.
So I suppose, sometimes with these white-collar crime, I suppose, cases, we haven't traditionally put people like that behind bars. But on this occasion, he is led away, and we have the picture in the paper of him in handcuffs. What's the sentence, and where is he being? Do we know where he's being jailed?
Well, he was given a 3-year sentence with 1 year suspended. And as you say, we have seen cases where white-collar crime, the perception is it is treated more softly than other types of crime. But I think in this case, the lack of an explanation for what he done, and also the fact that the judge said he was motivated by nothing other than pure dishonesty and utter greed, that does have a significant role in terms of sentencing, when a judge comes to decide whether somebody should get a custodial sentence or maybe be given a second chance.
Yes, well, he'll maybe have time to reflect on his actions in Castlereagh. So thanks, Pat.